The stars above Varela 9 shimmered like molten glass, caught in the faint distortion of the planet's upper atmosphere. The sky was not blue, but a fluid violet haze rippling with streams of silver dust that glowed whenever the twin suns shifted in orbit. From her balcony of obsidian stone, Lady Sharon Valira watched the skies she had once commanded with pride. The spires of the Dragon Council towered behind her, their crystalline architecture humming faintly, alive with plasma veins and the whispers of coded thought. Yet for all their grandeur, the air around her carried the hollow scent of endings. She knew the verdict long before the council announced it. The young always think they invent change. They had summoned her not to honor her centuries of service, but to dismiss them, to remind her that even dragons could be replaced. Her scales, once a deep emerald that shimmered with refracted starlight, had begun to lose their luster. The gold that edged her wings had dulled to a muted brass. To the ascendancy, that was enough to mark her as unfit for representation, unfit for the image they wished to project to the cosmos. When they finally spoke the words, "retired for the good of the image," the phrase struck her harder than any weapon. Retired. As if wisdom itself could expire. As if memory, experience, sacrifice, all the fragile treasures she had gathered across 4 centuries, had no currency in this glittering new era. She bowed her head, not in obedience but in mourning. The young lords and ladies of the council bowed back, their neural augmentations gleaming faintly behind their eye ridges, their wings bearing the metallic sheen of biotechnological perfection. They had remade themselves into icons, beings of seamless symmetry and synthetic fire. To them, she was an antique, a creature of scales and scars, unaugmented, untouched by the current of progress. When they turned away, she lingered a moment longer in the hall, tracing her claws along the etched runes of the great floor. The symbols told the story of the first flight, the time when dragons first shed their planetary chains and took to the stars. She had been there when those runes were carved. Her claws had drawn some of them. Now the hall no longer remembered her name. Her departure from Varela 9 was quiet. No ceremony, no procession. Her vessel, an old diplomatic cruiser, waited alone on the landing terrace. The ship's hull was streaked with plasma burns from ancient battles she had survived. Its AI, loyal to her and her alone, greeted her with a soft hum of recognition. "Destination, Lady Valira," it asked in a tone that had grown almost tender through the decades. "Anywhere they are not watching," she replied. The ship lifted from the surface in a slow, deliberate ascent. Beneath her, the luminous cities of the dragons shrank into motes of light, fading into the purple clouds. Above her stretched the cold vastness of interstellar night, a silence so deep it pressed against the soul. She drifted for weeks. There were no ports that welcomed her name anymore. The new order had erased her from the registry, her diplomatic codes invalidated, her status reduced to that of a wanderer. She passed through the Orion Rift, where abandoned stations hung like bones in the void. She saw derelict freighters drifting aimlessly, their hulls pitted with micrometeorite scars. Occasionally, a transmission flickered through her comm system, distorted music, fragments of old human languages, echoes of civilizations that burned too fast. In the quiet, she thought of time, not as a river, but as a tide that pulled everything into forgetting. Dragons once believed themselves eternal. But now, she knew better. Eternity was not a gift, it was a debt. Every century paid in loneliness. On the 33rd cycle of her exile, her cruiser's engines began to fail. Power fluctuations rippled through the plasma core, and the ship's AI, its voice faltering like an old friend struggling to stay awake, warned her that containment was impossible. She could have abandoned it, escaped in a pod, signaled for rescue. But to whom? Her name was ash in the archives. She chose instead to guide the ship into the nearest gravity well, a small, uncharted world orbiting a dying sun. The descent was violent. The atmosphere burned around her like liquid amber. Systems failed one after another, alarms screaming into the void. Her claws gripped the command chair, her wings shielding her face from shattering glass. When the ship struck the dunes, the impact tore through metal and scale alike. She remembered the scent of scorched sand, the distant sound of wind, and then, silence. For a long while, she lay among the wreckage. The air was dry, heavy with iron dust. The horizon shimmered under the red sun, endless and empty. It might have been the end. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the stillness, ready to dissolve into legend. But fate, it seemed, was not done with her. Through the haze of drifting sand, a sound approached, a rhythmic vibration, soft but persistent. A machine, perhaps. She opened one eye. A shape emerged from the heat shimmer, a creature on 4 legs, mechanical, its joints glinting faintly with human engineering. Upon its back rode a man wrapped in a tattered duster, the brim of his hat shadowing his face. His presence was an anachronism, a figure torn from another age entirely. He dismounted slowly, scanning the wreckage with a hand on his plasma sidearm. When his eyes found her, half buried, wings shattered, blood gleaming faintly like molten copper, he froze. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind tugged at his coat, and the wreck behind her hissed with cooling metal. "You're real," he said softly, disbelief lacing every syllable. The Lyra tried to lift her head, but her body refused. "And you," she rasped, her voice a low vibration, "are late." The man hesitated, then laughed once, rough, disbelieving. "Guess I am." And so it was that the last dragon of Varela met the last cowboy of humanity, 2 relics beneath a dying sun, strangers bound by extinction, and by the faint, impossible spark of something that refused to fade. The wind never stopped on Eidolon's reach. It whispered through the canyons like a living thing, dragging ribbons of red dust across the plains. Cal Rains had long since stopped noticing it, it was part of him now, the rhythm beneath the silence. The world was half dead, a remnant of the terraforming age, breathable air but poisoned water, daylight that lingered too long, and a sun that glowed with a tired orange pulse. Yet somehow, life clung to it. Cal's ranch lay at the edge of nowhere, a scatter of low domes and wind harvesters, surrounded by miles of biomech cattle grazing on engineered lichens that shimmered faintly under the light. He had once loved the solitude. The machines obeyed, the wind spoke softly, and the stars above were constant companions. But lately, the silence had grown heavier. Nights stretched longer, filled with the ghosts of old wars and names he could no longer say aloud. Sometimes, when the desert trembled with far-off storms, he'd imagine he heard the voice of the woman he'd lost, a voice calling him back to a world that no longer existed. When the radar pinged, he almost ignored it. The system often glitched, false echoes from meteoroid fragments or malfunctioning satellites. But this signal was different. It pulsed with structured rhythm, not random interference. He leaned over the console, squinting at the readout. An object descending through the upper atmosphere, trajectory unstable. Velocity too controlled for debris, too erratic for a freighter. He adjusted the filters. The energy signature was ancient, ion traces in patterns he hadn't seen since his service days. And beneath it, something else, bio-signs. "Hell," he muttered. "That's no rock." Within minutes, his skimmer was ready, a battered hovercraft with exposed thrusters and an AI too stubborn to die. He slung his plasma rifle across his back, not because he expected trouble, but because out here, trouble didn't wait for an invitation. The skimmer roared to life, cutting through the dunes like a shard of light. The crash site was 30 clicks east, near the edge of the glass fields. As he approached, he saw the trail first, molten streaks carved deep into the sand, still smoking, the air vibrating with static charge. The wreck itself looked less like a ship and more like something alive that had been torn open. Its hull shimmered in shifting hues, metal, yet somehow organic, its surface breathing faintly as if reluctant to die. He dismounted and approached slowly, boots sinking into the soft dust. The air tasted of ozone and burnt iron. A faint hum pulsed from within the wreck, rhythmic like a heartbeat. He peered through the fissure in the hull and saw her. She was unlike anything he'd ever seen, scaled but not reptilian, wounded but radiant. Her wings lay folded and broken beside her, their translucent membranes catching the sun in fractured rainbows. Her body, enormous even in collapse, glowed faintly where veins of bioluminescent light pulsed beneath her skin. She was breathing, slow, deliberate breaths that stirred the dust around her. For a long moment, Cal could only stare. Every old story about dragons, every myth whispered across the colonies, came flooding back. Humanity hadn't seen their kind for generations, not since the border treaties failed and the last of the ascendancy withdrew beyond the rim. To find one here, dying on this forgotten world, it felt impossible, like stumbling into a dream too large for the waking mind. He took a cautious step forward. Her eyes snapped open. Gold, deep and sharp as a forge fire, locking onto him with a weight that froze his muscles. When she spoke, her voice seemed to echo through the ground itself. "Human," she said, the word tasting like an ancient curse. He swallowed, raising his hands. "Easy there. You're hurt." She studied him, her pupils narrowing to slits. "This world, not dragonkind's. Why are you here?" "I could ask you the same," he replied. "You fell out of the sky." Her gaze softened slightly. She tried to rise, but pain rippled through her frame, forcing her down again. Cal hesitated only a second before stepping closer. He reached for a small injector at his belt, a field stim. "This'll help stabilize your vitals. Won't fix much, but—" Her growl stopped him mid-motion. "Do not touch me." "Fine," he said, lowering it. "Suit yourself. But if you bleed out here, the Scav bots'll pick you clean by morning." Her head tilted, faint amusement flickering in her tone. "You threaten me with scavengers." "Just stating the facts, ma'am." The word ma'am seemed to startle her more than the threat. Something unreadable passed over her features, an expression that didn't belong to a creature of war and legend. When he offered her water from his canteen, she hesitated, then accepted, her claws trembling slightly as she lifted it to her lips. The sun had dipped lower by the time he helped her onto the skimmer. Her weight nearly crushed the suspension system, but he managed to stabilize it with field boosters. They traveled in silence across the crimson dunes, the wind howling between them. Occasionally, he caught her watching him, not with suspicion, but with curiosity, as though she were trying to recall a long-forgotten story. At the ranch, he set her up in the old storage hangar, the only space big enough to contain her. She examined her surroundings with quiet disdain, the flickering hololamps, the rough steel walls, the faint smell of oil and dust. "This is your dwelling?" she asked. "Part of it. I've got better quarters inside, but you'd have to fit through the door first." She huffed, a small burst of smoke rising from her nostrils. "Humans and their boxes. Always hiding in shells." He smiled faintly. "Can't all have wings." That made her pause. The silence stretched between them until, at last, she said, "You have my thanks, though I did not ask for your help." "Don't mention it," he said, turning away. "Out here, we look out for whoever the desert spits up. Doesn't happen often." As he left the hangar, the night wind began to rise, carrying with it the faint hum of the old planet's machinery buried deep below the sands. From inside, the dragon lady's eyes followed him until he was gone. For the first time in years, she felt something unexpected, a flicker of warmth beneath the cold shell of exile. In the distance, lightning split the horizon, reflecting off the wreckage of her fallen ship. Above them, the stars turned slowly, indifferent witnesses to a meeting that should never have happened, a human haunted by ghosts, and a dragon too old to dream. Yet in that desolate silence, something ancient began to stir, something neither of them yet dared to name. The nights on Eidolon's reach were strange things, too bright, too quiet. The planet's thin atmosphere let the stars burn sharp and close, and every metallic surface reflected their light like cold fire. Cal often woke before dawn, unable to sleep through the silence. That night, He sat outside the hangar with a cup of synth coffee, watching the sky turn from black to a bruised violet. Inside, he could hear her breathing, a deep, rhythmic sound like the sea trapped in an engine core. He'd patched her wounds as best he could with a field medkit and nanogel from his old army stores, but dragons were far from his area of expertise. 3 days had passed since the crash. She still hadn't given him her name. She spoke rarely, and when she did, her voice filled the space like an echo that refused to fade. He had learned, though, that she was no ordinary creature. Her blood shimmered with bioluminescent threads that pulsed in response to temperature, a biological interface system far beyond human design. The scales around her neck bore faint etchings of circuitry, runic patterns that glowed when she moved. Living technology, woven into her body. When he checked on her that morning, he found her awake, her golden eyes fixed on the light streaming through the cracks in the hangar walls. She turned her head slowly as he entered, her movements precise despite her injuries. "You watch the stars as if they'll answer you," she said. He smirked. "Old habit. Spent a lot of time in orbit back in the day. You start looking up even when you're down here." "You were a soldier," she said, not asking but knowing. He nodded. "Yeah. Long time ago. The Outer Belt conflicts. We thought we were protecting the colonies. Turns out we were just keeping someone else's profit margins safe." She studied him for a moment. "And now you herd machines across sand. Easier than herding people." He shrugged. "They don't talk back." That earned him a soft rumble of amusement. So quiet he almost missed it. "You speak like one who has seen too much," she said. "Humans burn through their years quickly, but your eyes, they carry the weight of centuries." He met her gaze. "Maybe it's just the dust." For a while, they said nothing. The wind scraped against the hangar walls, whistling through the gaps like a restless spirit. Cal busied himself checking the generator levels, though he kept glancing back at her. Something about her presence filled the air with a gravity that made every sound sharper, every movement deliberate. Later that day, he noticed her shifting uneasily, her claws tracing faint patterns in the dust. The nanogel had closed her wounds, but the deeper damage ran beneath the surface. "What's wrong?" he asked. "My ship," she murmured. "Its core still burns. If it falls into scavenger hands, the Ascendancy will sense it. They will come." "Ascendancy? My people. Or what's left of them. They do not tolerate what they discard. They erase it." Her eyes narrowed. "They will come for the wreck, and for me." He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Well, that's bad news. There's not much here worth fighting over. I'd rather keep it that way." "You could leave," she said quietly. "Abandon this place. Save yourself." Cal looked around, the rusting wind harvesters, the worn-out domes, the distant glimmer of the biomech herd. "There's nowhere else for me to go," he said simply. "This patch of dust is all I've got left." Her gaze lingered on him for a long time. Then she said, softer, "You are a fool." He smiled. "I've been called worse." That night, while she slept, he rode out to the crash site. The wreck was half buried in sand now, glowing faintly from the cracks in its hull. Strange, rhythmic pulses moved across its surface, like a heartbeat struggling to continue. He crouched beside it, scanning with his wrist console. Energy readings were unstable but not dead. Something within the ship was still alive. Something trying to reach out. "AI core," he muttered. "Of course." He connected a cable and brought up a data feed. The system resisted, encryptions folding over each other like living tissue. When it finally opened, a flicker of blue light formed above the console, an image, half static, half memory. The Dragon ship's AI, projecting in a human shape of pure light. "Identity, Sharon Valira," it said, voice fragmented. "Status, exiled." Directives revoked. Emergency failsafe, active. Cal frowned. Valira, so that's her name. The AI turned its flickering eyes toward him. You are not authorized. This vessel belongs to the Ascendancy. Yeah, I gathered. She's safe. For now. Safety is irrelevant. Her termination was decreed by the Council. He clenched his jaw. Well, she's still breathing, so you'll have to deal with it. The hologram faltered. If the Council traces this beacon, they will not come for her alone. They will cleanse the sector. Meaning? Sterilization protocols. Orbital bombardment. The air seemed to grow colder. Cal shut the feed and yanked the cable free. The pulse of the ship dimmed to a slow, mournful rhythm. He stared at it for a long time, the red dunes stretching endlessly around him, and thought about the woman-dragon sleeping in his hangar, exiled by her own kind, carrying danger like a storm in her blood. When he returned before dawn, he found her awake again. Her eyes caught the first light of morning, burning brighter than the sun. You know my name now, she said. I do, he replied. Sharon Valira. She inclined her head slightly, regal even in exile. And now you also know why I cannot stay. Maybe, he said, setting down his rifle, but until that sky falls, you've got a roof and a friend here. She looked at him for a long time, her gaze unreadable. Then she said, almost to herself, humans. Always building homes on the edge of extinction. He chuckled quietly. Gives us a view. Outside, the dawn bled into gold. Somewhere high above, a faint signal pulsed through the void, carrying word of a dragon who refused to die, and a human foolish enough to keep her alive. The warning came first as a shimmer in the sky, a distortion, like a mirage of molten metal twisting against the violet haze. Cal noticed it while tending the skimmer's plasma intake, the hum of the desert wind suddenly slicing sharper through the hangar walls. His pulse quickened as the radar flared, a series of arcs forming patterns he hadn't seen since orbital patrols. The readings weren't just unusual, they were deliberate, precise, and massive. They found her, he muttered under his breath. Inside the hangar, Valira stirred, her golden eyes flicking toward him. She had been pacing quietly, her claws tracing faint grooves in the reinforced floor, a restless energy vibrating through her veins. The Ascendancy, she said, her voice a low, resonant growl. They have traced my signal. They will come, and they will not negotiate. Cal set down the tools he was holding, feeling the weight of the moment settle in his shoulders. Well, that's not exactly news I wanted over morning coffee. Her gaze hardened. You underestimate them, human. Even in the outer rim, their reach is absolute. If we are to survive, we must be prepared for confrontation, armed or otherwise. Cal stepped closer. And by we, you mean me? By we, I mean both of us, she said, wings trembling slightly, either from fatigue or anticipation. You may be a relic of this planet, but you are resourceful. I have seen it. That will count more than most of your species realize. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. The desert's edge had always been a place of solitude, and now it would become a battlefield. He accessed the skimmer's auxiliary systems, linking them with the hangar's generators. The hum of dormant tech surged to life, old mining lasers, electromagnetic nets, and energy turrets he had scavenged from derelict freighters. It was crude, but enough to slow an organized assault, maybe buy them time. Hours later, the first wave appeared. Not a dozen scouts, not a single small strike team, but an entire Ascendancy patrol ship, its hull shimmering with adaptive camo and kinetic shielding. It hovered over the dunes like a predatory star, scanning, calculating. Small drones dropped silently, their iridescent bodies catching the early sun, seeking heat, movement, life. Valira rose to her full height, her scales glimmering faintly with the latent power that still pulsed through her veins. She flexed her claws, the tips glowing with residual plasma energy. "They will not take me easily," she said, her tone both warning and promise. Cal gripped the rifle at his back, fingers tightening around the plasma sidearm. He had fought humans, he had fought aliens, but never a force like this, a patrol engineered to erase anyone standing against the Ascendancy's edict. Yet when he looked at Valira, he saw something older than fear, older than strategy, a defiance carved in flesh and fire. The first drones landed, tiny but lethal, each armed with micro-explosives and plasma emitters. Cal fired the skimmer-mounted laser, incinerating one midair, while Valira's claws tore through another, her movements precise, fluid, terrifyingly fast. Sparks flew, sand exploded, and for a brief instant, the horizon was a storm of fire and light. But the patrol ship was not deterred. It lowered orbital cannons, its targeting systems locking onto the hangar. Cal ducked behind a support beam, hearing the low rumble of the energy cannons as they charged. Valira moved like a shadow, her body a blur, intercepting the blasts with a shield of her own energy, deflecting plasma bolts into the sand, sending geysers of molten debris into the air. The dance continued, violent and unyielding. Cal found himself shouting instructions to the skimmer's AI, activating defenses he had long forgotten how to use. Turret's left flank. Now. Deploy the nets, don't let them get through. The machines responded, firing, twisting, shocking the enemy drones into immobility. Through the chaos, their coordination began to form, an instinctive understanding neither had spoken aloud. When a squad of drones breached the hangar's threshold, Valira lunged, claws ripping through reinforced doors like paper, plasma energy flaring around her hands. Cal followed immediately, sidearm blazing, covering her flanks. They moved as one, predator and protector, human and dragon, a combination the Ascendancy had never anticipated. The patrol ship hovered, recalculating. Its AI detected anomalies, life forms moving in impossible patterns. The commander aboard the ship's bridge spoke through the comm, voice filtered through layers of synthetic modulation. "Lady Valira, you are commanded to surrender. Resistance is futile. Human collateral will be eliminated." Valira's laugh rumbled through the hangar, a sound more like the shift of tectonic plates than amusement. "Tell your masters I do not negotiate with the dead or the obsolete." Cal glanced at her, momentarily caught by the power in her tone, the energy that surged not from weapons but from sheer presence. He realized then that their fight was no longer about survival alone, it was about defiance, about proving that no decree, no council, no authority could dictate who they would be. The battle raged through the day, stretching into night, lit by flashing plasma, molten sand, and the eerie glow of the desert moon's rising. Every strike, every counter, every pulse of energy brought them closer, weaving a bond forged in necessity and the raw pulse of life under fire. When the first assault was repelled, and the patrol ship retreated beyond the horizon, Cal collapsed onto the sand, exhaustion weighing him down. Valira stood above him, wings partially unfurled, scales dimmed to a soft glow as she surveyed the wreckage. "You are reckless," she said softly, almost tenderly, but perhaps not entirely useless. He chuckled weakly, brushing blood and dust from his coat. "And you're terrifying," he replied, meeting her gaze. Her eyes softened, just slightly, and for a brief moment, the war ended, not in victory, but in understanding. Two exiles, standing together under alien stars, had proven that even against the absolute force of the Ascendancy, life, and perhaps something far more fragile, far more dangerous, still had a voice. Above them, the sky shimmered with the distant glow of the Ascendancy fleet, a reminder that their victory was temporary, that the hunt would continue. Yet in the quiet between storms, Cal and Valira knew one truth: they would face the universe not as prey, not as relics, but as partners, bound by fire, by courage, and by the unspoken promise that neither would stand alone. The desert night clung to Eidolon's reach like a living shroud. The hangar had been repaired as best they could, but the sand still sifted through cracks in the floor, and the air was thick with ozone and dust. Cal moved carefully among the wreckage, his boots crunching over fragments of scorched metal, sensors blinking faintly in the dim light. Valira sat on the edge of a reinforced platform, her wings partially extended, casting long shadows against the walls, scales dimly glowing from the residual plasma energy that still coursed through her veins. "Your kind heals fast," he said quietly, though not as a question. She didn't respond at first, eyes scanning the sky as if she could read the faint distortions of the Ascendancy's search drones from here. "Flesh is fragile," she said finally. "Metal endures longer. Yet, I am neither fully machine nor fully human. I am a compromise between what has been and what must be." Cal nodded. He knew she was speaking of more than her body. Every scar, every glowing filament in her blood, was a testament to centuries of survival, of battles fought across planets and stars. And yet, there was fragility now, his hands could see it, even if hers could not admit it. He crouched beside her, running a diagnostic over her energy core with a portable scanner. "You can't keep burning like this. You'll drain yourself completely if we don't find a solution." Her golden eyes shifted to meet his, a sharp, piercing look that made him flinch. "Do you think I would ask for your help if I were not already desperate?" Cal paused, sensing a strange weight behind her words. He had faced countless enemies, navigated uncharted systems, survived battles where every decision was life or death. Yet now, standing beside this dragon who was neither fully dragon nor fully human, he felt something unfamiliar: responsibility, yes, but also awe. And perhaps, for the first time in decades, hope. Over the next few cycles, they worked together, modifying the wreckage of her ship. Cal's mechanical expertise and Valira's ancient energy manipulation blended in unexpected ways. They rewired the plasma conduits, augmented the cooling systems, and reinforced the hull with scavenged alloys from derelict drones. Every adjustment, every spark of energy, carried the unspoken understanding that they were creating more than a vessel, they were crafting survival, defiance, and a fragile sanctuary against a universe determined to erase them. It was during one long night, while calibrating the ship's auxiliary thrusters, that Cal finally spoke the question that had hovered in the air between them. "Why do they care so much? Why does the Ascendancy want to erase you?" Valira paused, her claws tracing a faint arc in the sand beside the ship's frame. "Because I am history. Because I remember what they wish forgotten. Because I refuse to bow to obsolescence." Her voice trembled slightly, not with weakness, but with the weight of centuries. "They see me as a threat not for my power, but for my memory. I embody what they cannot control." Cal absorbed her words, the wind brushing through his hair, carrying the scent of ionized dust and ozone. He could understand that. In his own way, he had always resisted the erasure of time, the way colonies and governments treated human lives as expendable. But here, in front of him, history itself breathed, a living testament to endurance. When the final tests were complete, she activated the ship's core. Energy flared across the hull, pulsing like a heartbeat, the bioluminescent filaments in her body glowing in tandem. Cal's instruments registered readings off the charts, systems stabilizing in a harmony that was part human engineering, part dragon physiology. It was dangerous, unprecedented, but it worked. "You've done it," he said, awe in his voice. She looked at him, a strange mixture of pride and sorrow in her eyes. "No," she corrected softly. "We have done it. Together." The night was far from over. From the edge of the horizon, a faint shimmer of light began to grow, tiny pulses moving across the dunes, search drones, more numerous than before, drawn by the residual signal of her ship. They would come, of course. The Ascendancy would not relent. But now, Valira had a choice she had never had before. "Cal," she said suddenly, voice low, almost hesitant. "If I remain in my current form, fully dragon, I risk your life. The energy required to maintain the defenses will consume me, and anyone nearby could be caught in the fallout. There is a way to bond my essence to a form that will survive alongside you. But it is forbidden." His eyes widened. "Bond your essence? You mean, change?" She nodded slowly. Yes. Part dragon, part human compatible. It will allow me to survive this world, and yours, without destroying you. But it is irreversible. And no one from my kind has attempted it in centuries. Failure would mean death. For both of us, possibly. Cal's chest tightened. Every instinct screamed danger, yet he felt an undeniable pull toward her, not just fascination, but something deeper, unspoken. Then, we do it together, he said simply. Her eyes searched his, golden fires flickering with uncertainty and something almost like hope. You would risk yourself for me. I would risk myself for a storm if it threatened the stars, he said. A tense silence followed, broken only by the hum of the ship's core and the whispering wind. Slowly, deliberately, she extended a claw, touching the back of his hand. The energy from her body surged through him, warm and alive, and a quiet understanding passed between them, a bond forged not just in survival, but in trust, defiance, and the possibility of something that transcended fear. By the time the first drones reached the horizon, the transformation had begun. Light rippled across her scales, wings dissolving into filaments of radiant energy, her body compacting and reshaping, a fusion of dragon essence and human compatibility. Cal held her hand, feeling the energy weave around them, a tether stronger than fear or death. When she opened her eyes again, they were human enough to meet his gaze comfortably, yet they still shimmered with the golden fire of the dragon beneath. She smiled faintly, and he knew they had crossed a boundary that could never be uncrossed. The first pulse of enemy fire struck, but now they faced it together, not human against dragon, not isolated relics of history, but a single force, alive in ways the Ascendancy had never imagined. And in that moment, Cal realized that love, like fire and metal and plasma, could forge something impossible, and that sometimes survival was only the beginning of a story. The freighter hummed beneath them, a patched-together vessel of scavenged alloys, repurposed thrusters, and salvaged life support systems. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough for two exiles who had no home to return to, no empire to protect, no law that could touch them. The stars stretched wide and cold outside the hull, constellations unfamiliar, some burned out before humans or dragons had charted them. And yet, for the first time in centuries, Sharon Valira and Cal Rains felt unshackled. Valira had fully adapted to her new form. The transformation had stabilized, blending dragon essence with human physiology in a way that made her both formidable and vulnerable, powerful yet able to walk quietly among humans without fear of immediate destruction. Her scales shimmered faintly along her arms and neck, a reminder of the centuries of life she had carried. Her wings, though no longer capable of flight, had dissolved into radiant energy filaments that pulsed with her heartbeat, visible beneath her skin as subtle patterns of light. Cal still marveled at her presence, the energy almost tangible, warm beneath his touch. They had left Eidolon's reach behind, the desert planet shrinking to a faint glimmer in the freighter's sensors. The Ascendancy had pursued them briefly, but the improvised energy shielding Valira had helped configure, combined with Cal's deft maneuvering through asteroid belts and uncharted debris fields, had kept them safe. For a time, the galaxy seemed to allow them a reprieve, a stretch of open sky where neither past nor future could dictate their choices. Cal leaned back in the cockpit, listening to the soft hum of the freighter's engines. So, what now? He asked, not entirely rhetorically. We can't just wander forever. Not without being hunted. Valira's eyes, golden yet softened by her new form, met his. We can wander. But we can also choose where to be. We are no longer bound by their edicts, their judgments, or their fear of what we represent. We are our own legacy now. Cal chuckled quietly. Sounds like a plan. I've got a few old contacts on the fringe. We could find a place among the outposts, maybe even rebuild something resembling a community. She nodded, a faint smile curving her lips. Perhaps. But the stars themselves have always been our true home. Perhaps we belong to them now, not to any one world. Days passed as they traversed the outer sectors, passing through asteroid fields and dead moons, witnessing the remnants of civilizations that had burned too fast to endure. They stopped at old trading posts, often deserted, sometimes populated by survivors of failed colonies or smugglers eking out fragile lives. Wherever they went, the story of the Dragon Lady and the human cowboy spread quietly, whispered by traders, scavengers, and rogue pilots alike. They became legends not because of conquest, but because of defiance, a warning that life, in any form, could refuse erasure. One evening, while drifting near a fading nebula, Cal observed the Lyra staring at the colorful swirls of gas and light. Thinking, he asked. "I am remembering," she said. "The worlds I have seen, the beings I have met, the wars I have waged. And yet, in all that, I never imagined this. Not companionship. Not trust. Not peace." He reached over, brushing a strand of her hair, a glint of luminous filament, behind her ear. "You deserve it," he said softly. "Every bit. You earned it." A faint laugh escaped her, rich and musical, carrying through the cockpit despite the hum of machinery. "And you?" she asked. "Have you earned anything? Or do you survive merely by stubbornness?" Cal smirked. "I survive because I refuse to die alone. Guess that's earned, in a way." They settled into a rhythm. Days were spent navigating, repairing, and exploring. Nights were quiet, filled with conversation, laughter, or simply the shared presence of each other beneath alien stars. They discovered new phenomena, microsingularities, drifting biospheres, abandoned alien megastructures, each a reminder of how vast, and how indifferent, the universe could be. And yet, even in that indifference, they found beauty, warmth, and a sense of belonging neither had known in centuries. The final test of their bond came unexpectedly. While passing near a collapsing star system, a rogue patrol vessel, Ascendancy remnants seeking revenge, intercepted them. The ship's armaments were formidable, enough to tear through conventional shields. But the Lyra, fully integrated with her new form, manipulated the freighter's energy systems, diverting power, bending electromagnetic pulses, and generating temporary grav field distortions. Cal piloted with precision, weaving through debris, narrowly avoiding catastrophic collisions. Together, they neutralized the threat without firing a single lethal shot, a testament to their synergy and ingenuity. When the danger passed, they drifted in silence. Cal exhaled, feeling exhaustion and relief wash over him. "I think, we might actually make it," he said. The Lyra's hand brushed his, the filaments of energy coiling gently around his fingers, warm and alive. "Yes," she said. "We have endured storms, armies, exiles, and time itself. Now, we endure each other. That is enough." For the first time, they allowed themselves to hope, not for grandeur, not for empire, not for power, but for something rarer, understanding, partnership, and love that transcended prejudice, expectation, and even species. As they charted a course deeper into unclaimed space, the freighter glided between nebulae and shattered moons, the stars stretching infinitely above. Below them, nothing awaited but the unknown, and they welcomed it. They had no claim, no obligation, no fear of judgment. The galaxy, vast and indifferent, became theirs not through dominion, but through choice. Cal glanced at her, feeling the quiet surge of life and light radiating from her form. "We'll see worlds no one else has seen," he said. "And we will face them together," she replied, her eyes reflecting distant stars, her energy filaments pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. The freighter sailed on, carrying two exiles who had been deemed obsolete by their worlds, but who had forged something stronger than law, stronger than empire, stronger even than death. A human and a dragon, intertwined in form and spirit, gliding through the infinite void, unbound, unbroken, and utterly alive. And in the silence between stars, they were finally, irrevocably free.